are some questions and ideas that I propose we play with. And I do encourage that we play with these ideas. What do they mean for you? What do they mean in your context? What surprises you? What questions do we have? And I welcome the opportunity to have a shared and collaborative time for questions as well. How can the ELT landscape move forward with vibrancy and relevancy? How does translanguaging increase the efficacy in language acquisition classrooms? And here, let your energy be used to build, not destroy. I love that's a tea. I was having tea that morning. How does the integration of translanguaging, wildness, beauty, and imagination increase language acquisition and efficacy? And this photo is of a hummingbird. A dear friend of mine takes photos of hummingbirds, and she named that one Dawn and sent me that photo. So I love that photo. So thinking about your context, the objectives of our time, how translanguaging can be utilized to increase language acquisition, to gain ideas to implement translanguaging in your own educational context, to reflect on ways to increase wildness, creativity, authenticity, beauty, harmony, and imagination action in your language classrooms for increased language acquisition and student engagement. The combination of translanguaging with wildness, authenticity, beauty, harmony, imagination, and action invite student engagement in language acquisition in expanded and exciting ways. And I encourage you, and I'm trying to find my chat. If you have ideas, please pop them into the chat. What does this make you think of? What ideas is this are popping into your head right now as far as what this might mean for you in your classroom? Anything along those lines. Okay, so during our time together, we will look at translanguaging. We will look at wildness, beauty, and imagination of language in English language teaching. And then we're going to look at bringing those ideas together and how do we apply them. And again, with the application, what does this mean for your particular context? And then questions and conversation. So, first, translanguaging. What do you know about translanguaging? And here I am going to open it up. What do you know about translanguaging? Whoops, let me pop back over here. And I encourage you to pop those ideas into the chat. And I can't see my chat at this moment. Perhaps one of the facilitators, could you read aloud what some of those ideas are that are being popped into the chat right now? And I'll try to find it. There it is. Okay. Ideas. What do you know about translanguaging? Or what don't you know about translanguaging? What do you think it might be? Are there different definitions? There are different definitions, but there's different applications of what I would say is now a fairly central definition. Freedom to use multiple languages, absolutely. Combination of various languages. Yes. What else? Other ideas. What do you know about translanguaging? And thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. Any other ideas? What do you know about translanguaging? Or I have no idea what you're talking about, Dr. Wink, which is also one that I hear. Let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, and I'm so glad I found my chat. I feel more connected to all of us with the chat. Okay, so here is a changing, we're in the midst of a changing EFL landscape. And those of us who have been in the field for years will really recognize kind of what we're in the midst of. The former paradigm, very much the idea of separate languages and to use only English in the EFL classroom. So, this idea that in order to promote that language acquisition will occur most effectively if only English is allowed. And in the contemporary paradigm, we really, through research, know and encourage and foster allowing students to embrace their full linguistic repertoire and landscape within the class. And so, as Dr. Roth had said, are there different definitions? And a central definition is very much taking advantage, allowing, embracing students' full linguistic repertoire to come into the EFL classroom. So it originally comes from a Welsh context, actually. The early research came from Wales, and it was a deliberate switching. And we will look at when is translanguaging deliberate and when is it spontaneous. And and every I think everyone with us now is multilingual, bilingual, multilingual, and be thinking about when do we deliberately switch between languages and when does it just occur naturally? And we're going to sink into those ideas. And it used to be in the former paradigm, we prohibited the use of L1 of the first language, and that comes from Jim Cummins' work. And so this former paradigm assumed that only English should be used in the EFL classroom for the most effective language learning and to avoid the transfer of other languages. And that somehow, if we included mother tongues, that it would prevent and prohibit the use of the acquisition of additional languages, the acquisition of English. And this was very much of a linear, it was believed that language acquisition was very much a linear focus. And we're really going to look at that. And it was also very much based in an imperialist legacy. And that comes from the work of the eminent Robert Phillipson. I love him. I love his work. And there was the ideas of the two solitudes assumption. Again, this comes from Dr. Jim Cummins, that we had English and we had mother tongue and we had mother tongue, and that those, and here Cummins used the two separate trees, and that somehow these languages were separate. What translanguaging embraces and what research now reflects, and what, at least in my multilingual life I live every single day, is that I speak three languages. I speak English, I speak Spanish, and I speak German. And with my languages, they mutually intertwine, they interweave, they mutually strengthen or weaken each other depending on the strength of each language. And so it's like a banyan tree, which if you look here, you see these different roots that are going up, all intertwined. They mutually sustain and strengthen one another rather than the two solitudes assumption. So there's this idea of interconnectedness, of interweaving of languages to support language acquisition. Go ahead and pop into the chat. What are your thoughts of these ideas, especially thinking as an ELT instructor, but also as a multilingual person? What has been your experiences with the ideas of the separate or the interconnected and the weaving? Go ahead and pop those into the chat. I welcome your experiences and ideas as we dive in. Please do go ahead and dive in. What are your thoughts on this? Because the whole idea of translanguaging within ELT, it really is a new paradigm. It's a tremendously exciting paradigm I think, and innovative, and opens up all kinds of new avenues for methods, for methodology, for strategies. What are your thoughts on translanguaging? Please do go ahead and dive in. When I teach foreign languages, I often use one, two, three languages to support my teaching. Bravo, that's fantastic. Yay. And now we're going to look at the research about why that is so effective. Anybody else, your thoughts on translanguaging? And this is why understanding this research is so important in our field, because in many ways it gives the research grounds and supports what our intuition knows, but we may not have the language to articulate. Let's go ahead and dive. Translanguaging makes students much more comfortable in learning and experimenting. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Lena Paul. Yes, and as we know, the single defining factor, the single most important factor in language acquisition and in all learning is people have to feel safe. We all have to feel safe. That is the single most important factor, as we know, in language acquisition and learning. So now back to Dr. Roth's question about what is translanguaging. And this is where we take these ideas and we look at how they do have different inferences and different applications. It can be an explanatory concept, an instinct, which also applies to monolingual. So it's basically kind of what I've just done is an explanation of what it is. So it is also a descriptive term, a label for the fluid use of multiple languages, which applies only to bilingual and multilingual speakers. And it is also a very much a political and pedagogical practice aimed at providing an equitable education to bilingual and multilingual people. So the embrace of mother tongue absolutely has political and pedagogical implications because it is providing equity for all languages and getting out of the hierarchical view of languages that frequently that places English in a more esteemed role. We want equity. So, and I saw someone else just, let's see here. It helps to better understand as students link new English concepts. Yes. And what they already know in their mother tongue. Absolutely. Bravo. I think you must have looked ahead in the slides. Absolutely. So again, with the former paradigms, and this is all these photos are mine. Many of them were taken on my runs in the morning. So you see how blessed we are with beautiful sunrises. So let's think about the communicative language teaching, CLT, that many of us learned and are familiar with, which is very much task-based, very much the spoken language, and very much scientific and discipline informed. This was also very much influenced by, again, the eminent Dr. Stephen Krashen, whose ideas have so influenced our field and our work with the natural order hypothesis, and that in immersive environments, using the target language in real life situations. So the immersed in, so if we're talking about English, in an English language classroom, in real life situations to provide that relevancy and meaning. Now let's look at, since the 19th century, language teaching methodologies have been under the illusion, and we're looking at this again historically, that they can get rid of the first language in the classroom by fiat and so forget its existence in decoding or code breaking. So somehow by preventing L1 or that it ceases to exist. And somehow by preventing students from bringing that in, we were going to promote this acquisition of a new language. But as so much second language acquisition research has shown, the first language is always present. Even when I'm speaking in Spanish, my English is always there. My mother tongue is always there, and I'm dipping into the strengths of that mother tongue, even though I'm expressing myself in an additional language, is always present in the students' minds. It has not disappeared simply because the teacher banned its use. It's just become invisible. Teachers can implement translanguaging through several concrete classroom activities, strategic group work, flexible note taking, comparative studies. I love this. Thank you so much. Translanguaging is mixing home language with school languages to help students learn better. I love this. Now, to think again, what has been your experiencing with translanguaging in teaching and life? And I venture to guess and to assume that each person, by virtue of we are here gathered together talking about these ideas and the field in which we bathe, we're all multilingual. We have all experienced this in our life and in our teaching. So, what has this been? Tap into what this means for you. Now, again, what does translanguaging mean? And we're going to go back to this. We're looking at Dr. Jim Cummins' work and defines translanguaging as a pedagogical approach that leverages students' full linguistic repertoire, moving beyond the traditional separation of languages in education. It recognizes that bilingual and multilingual individuals draw on all language resources, not just one at a time, to communicate and learn effectively. And that translanguaging in this view is not about switching between languages. And this is a really important, this is a very important concept, but about using all available linguistic resources to make meaning. Sometimes people will ask, well, is it a new way to talk about code switching? And while code switching is an element of translanguaging, switching was often viewed very pejoratively, and we are looking at translanguaging embraces all linguistic resources to make meaning. Understanding about different cultures, absolutely. A translanguaging space is created to learn about storage and knowledge systems that students carry in the classroom. Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. So we move beyond language separation. And here's just a recap: the interconnectedness of languages. It is strategic and flexible use. Sometimes we use it strategically. We're going to look at that. And sometimes our brain just look multilingual people. When we're with other multilingual people, we will just slide into whatever best expresses the ideas we want to express. And it is about empowering students by acknowledging and valuing students' diverse linguistic backgrounds. Translanguaging can create a more inclusive and empowering learning environment, allowing students to leverage their full potential. We're always bringing this back to the students. It is a transformative pedagogy. So when we think about, as we think about the different pedagogies, whether it's transmissive, which is basically memorization and regurgitation, if it is generative, which is immersive and based in meaning, but stays within the classroom, transformative, we take these ideas and we move beyond the classroom. And translanguaging absolutely falls in the move beyond the classroom. And it taps into the common underlying proficiency, again by Cummins, and that suggests that skills and knowledge acquired in one language can be transferred and utilized in another. This is something that we live, this idea of the iceberg analogy. And it used to be thought that languages, there was the separate underlying proficiency, like I learned Spanish in one part of my brain and English in the other. And now we know there's a common underlying proficiency that are expressed in different languages. So, for example, my understandings of language, I can express them in English, I can express them in Spanish, I can express them in German, but they all come from this common underlying proficiency, and the same is true of our students. And this is because I was absolutely fangirling. I was at a translanguaging conference, and this is Dr. Ofelia Garcia, who is very prominent and in the world of translanguaging. And I was just delighted to be sitting next to her at this conference. And what does Dr. Garcia share with us? An approach to the use of language, bilingualism, and education of bilinguals, multilinguals, that considers the language practices of bilinguals not as two autonomous language systems, as has traditionally been the case, but as one linguistic repertoire which features that have been societally constructed as belonging to two separate languages. I like translanguaging. Yes, it helps in understanding different cultures. I love this. What does the scholarship on translanguaging teach us? And why is it important for us to understand this so that we can use and apply it with efficacy in our classroom and come grounded from a place in research. And so, a language ideology that takes bilingualism, multilingualism as the norm posits that bilinguals do not separate their languages, a pedagogical stance that enables teachers and students to draw on all their linguistic and semiotic resources, a set of practices that are still being researched and described, but are not limited to code switching, and again, a transformational practice that continually invents and reinvents the world through languaging. And here we look at when we think about translanguaging and we think about what the former paradigm. So the former paradigm of English language teaching really used to fall in the vertical with the status of languages, with the teacher as sage on stage, with exclusive bounded practices, with status given to certain languages, and then marginalizing mother tongues. That that vertical idea that English that you need in order to get the status of imperial languages is basically where it lands. And what with translanguaging, it's very much a horizontal view. Again, it is a dismantling of the hierarchy of languages. There is a fluid moving back and forth, and that all languages are equally embraced in the classroom. Maximizes opportunities to reduce inequities, maximizes recognition and development of students' linguistic and knowledge resources. So, what does this mean for us as teachers? That classroom teachers as knowledge generators in multilingual contexts, linguistic political influences. Now, this is what I was talking about a little bit before. There's spontaneous and pedagogical translanguaging. The spontaneous is what we naturally do. So when I am speaking to somebody who speaks both English and Spanish, and I automatically integrate the word vamos a ir a la tienda because I need coffee. So I need to go to the store because I need coffee. And it's what we naturally do when speaking with others who speak our languages. So that's spontaneous. In the classroom, we are intentional and pedagogical, a pedagogic theory and practice that refers to instructional strategies which integrate two or more. And so, what do our research findings tell us about what happens with translanguaging in our English language teaching classrooms? So, this was Rasman did a research study in Indonesia. Students consistently engage with their full linguistic repertoire in Indonesian, Javanese, and English to add and advocate more vocabulary. And what that research shows is students who were involved in translanguaging pedagogy acquired more English by the end than the students who were in an English only classroom. Portales and Martí found that students in Spain deliberate use of their three languages, which would be Spanish, Catalan, and English, achieved different communicative purposes and again acquired more English. I see. There is a live atmosphere during the discussion. The learners and teachers feel the session and as a family discussion. Yes, yes, yes. Every participant tries to express through their mother tongue. Absolutely. The session becomes about playing and not learning. And that's where language acquisition happens best. We acquire language. We don't learn language. We acquire language best. So now, what are we talking about when we're translanguaging? Intentionally using pedagogic tools. So we scaffold content, and this was a research study done in Poland. We explain complex concepts such as grammar rules. So, for example, if I'm learning Spanish and I do not understand one of the grammar rules in Spanish, which way am I going to learn better? If I get that extraordinarily complex grammar rule explained to me in a language that I don't really understand or speak, or explained to me in English so then I can apply it in the additional language. to navigate the classroom environment effectively. And again, this goes back to this idea of safety. This goes back to this idea. It feels like a family. It feels like we're playing to build rapport. Absolutely. Our heart language is our mother tongue. If I have a student who is perhaps having a rough day, or if I have a student who is really struggling with these concepts, using their mother tongue is going to create that connection and that rapport that supports them in their learning. And to clarify understanding, going back to if there is a concept that I don't understand, explaining it to me in a language that I don't understand is not going to be terribly effective. So we explain it, we provide those cognitive coat hooks, that scaffolding in a language that students understand. So, what would this look like in your class or your context? And I invite you to share. What does this look like? And actually, you're already sharing beautifully. I love the session becomes about playing and not learning, which is where acquisition happens best. So think about and scribble down these ideas. I've got my notebook here in front of me. I'm scribbling down ideas throughout our session. The usage of multilingualism in the class assists the students to relate the language more practically. Absolutely. So we have the instructional cognitive tool to enhance understanding of content, especially grammar, those concepts as we're learning them for additional languages. We have the communicative functions, clarification, explaining instructions, promoting student engagement. And we have the climate and management functions, the social emotional scaffolding to enhance rapport with students, which can lower anxiety. And again, we want a low effective filter, again, from Dr. Stephen Krashen, which is the best way to learn language. I will learn language far better if I feel safe, if I'm having fun, if I'm learning about concepts that are meaningful and relevant to me, than if I'm memorizing and regurgitating. So, which of these ideas and methods resonated with me? And by that, I mean resonated most with you, for you to reflect on. And I saw this beautiful butterfly in my garden the other day. Which of these ideas resonated with you? Which might you play with integrating in the classroom? I invite you to dive in and to muse and to think about. What might this mean for my students, my teaching, and me? Builds confidence, especially for learners who hesitate to speak only in English. Of course, that sends students' anxiety through the roof. Absolutely. What are the challenges? Now, I want you to show over here. I want to see. So, of my three children, my oldest son is a rock climber. And thankfully, he shared this picture with his mommy after he was safely down off the rock. Because this little teeny tiny dot right here, that's my son. That's my son right there. Here's someone else he was climbing with. Like I say, thankfully, right? OMG is right. Like I say, thankfully, he was down and safe when he shared this image with his mommy. So, what are some of the challenges? Monolingual policies and structures, which have been historical. The pressures for English only, primarily from people who don't understand language acquisition. We have bureaucratic institutions remain focused on standardized exams. Oh my gosh, Dr. Roth, I know. That's the world we live in, isn't it? Which is why it is so important we understand and be able to articulate why what we're doing in the classroom supports English language acquisition, because that is so true. Teachers fear that students will rely too heavily on their primary language and these deep-rooted ideologies of separate language ideologies. And so here's some pragmatics. So what can we do? we can provide translations in the mother tongue of the English vocabulary because all of that's going to transfer. And one of the things that I do, and again, Spanish is an additional language for me, is I read a lot if I'm going to read something in Spanish, I read it in English first because then when I'm engaging with the Spanish, and if I run into a word I don't know or a concept is kind of fuzzy, I can bring in what I learned in English and I can apply it in the additional languages. So explicitly allow and invite students to draw upon their full linguistic repertoire. This alone is huge because usually students aren't allowed to. So this alone brings down it lowers that effective filter and allows them to tap into that. When students can interact in their mother tongue to understand the concepts in English language, then they participate more openly without any fear and express more. Yes, concepts become easier to comprehend using multi languages in the classroom. English language becomes easier. Yes, yes, and yes. Here's something that also cross linguistic comparisons. And this is a very specific concept. And that is where we literally explicitly say, okay, so in the mother tongue, when we conjugate verbs in the preterite tense, it looks like we do this, this, and this. And in English, when we conjugate verbs in the preterite context, we do this, this, and this. How are they the same? How are they different? Because that allows students to use it's the same thing we do when we're learning additional language. Okay, if I do this in English, and I do this, but in Spanish, we do this the same, but we do this differently. And then I have those cognitive coat hooks. Reading and listening to texts in both English and students' home languages. The teachers will have to read the literature in many languages to get the expected result of their teaching, mentoring, and lecturing. Judicious use of mother tongue in ELT, absolutely judicious use. And that's where that intention and our own bringing in our expertise as educators is key. We use it for scaffold. It's not. One of the things that really guides me by another of my literary heroines, Madeline L'Engle, she talks about the necessity of structure for freedom. And I think of it like a bird's nest. And the necessity when we're using translanguaging in the classroom, it is structured. We use it judiciously. We use it to scaffold. We use it for cross-linguistic comparisons. But without that structure, it's a free fall. And I think of it like a bird's nest. We create the structure for our students to be safe and play around inside. And that is because without that, it's a free fall. Allow mutual assistance as language partners in small groups. Offer bilingual resources and bilingual dictionaries, multilingual. Make connections with students' personal histories and cultural backgrounds. And several of us here have shared the importance of that in our conversation in the chat. How could I do this in my classroom or my job? Thoughts, what implications might this have? And I'm going to kind of go through because we're going to dive now into wildness, beauty, and imagination. Well, okay, what are we talking about with wildness of languages? Wildness connotes deep connection, authenticity, and freedom. And all of us are language teachers. All of us love, there was a reason we were drawn to language. Wildness is that sense of connection, it's that sense of authenticity that at least for me, it's why I love languages. It's why I love teaching languages. It's why I love traveling and learning languages. Terry Tempest Williams, and she was the one who shared that transformation occurring even when invisible, expresses wildness when fear is replaced by awe. And I think about the implications of that for the language classroom. When fear is replaced by awe, we recognize wildness as creativity in the extreme. And that's what language acquisition is. It's creative, it's wild, it's authentic. Language learning occurs effectively within a sense of engagement, lack of self awareness, and flow. I love this. Of all the arts and sciences made by man, none equals a language. For only a language in its living entirety can describe a unique and irreplaceable world. I saw this once in a forest in southern Mexico when a butterfly settled beside me. The color of it was a blue unlike any I had ever seen. There are nine different words in the Spanish Maya dictionary, but in the Porrua Spanish Maya dictionary, but just three Spanish translations, leaving six butterflies that can only be seen by the Maya, proving beyond doubt that when a language dies, six butterflies disappear from the consciousness of the earth. Why must we support mother languages? Other six butterflies disappear when we lose languages. How can we overcome the gap when the teacher is not familiar with the local language of students, as in the case of some Indian classroom settings? Beautiful question, important question. And that is when our sense of trust is vital. Teachers often don't trust students speaking in a language they don't understand, as if they're going to be talking about the teacher, as if they're going to be off task. That is where, and as teachers, we know what they're talking. If we don't know exactly what they're talking about, we tap into that energy and we know, are they on task? Are they making meaning? We don't have to understand the language to know if they're making meaning. That is where it taps into our sense of trust and educational expertise. Thank you so much, Mike, for posing that question. The beauty of language. And look at this. This was the first ever dahlia that I grew. And was that not so gorgeous? I love that flower. The beauty of language. And when I'm referring to beauty, I am referring to beauty in the indigenous sense of a holistic framework of harmony and understanding. A framework is understood through the indigenous worldview as expressed in Dene, which is an indigenous group here in the United States, as Hosho, meaning to live in peace, balance, beauty, and harmony. And this is what we want with language. Beauty of language expresses the beauty of language expands exponentially. The beauty of language itself opens worlds through language, through the acquisition of new languages, the beauty of connection. It's why we became language teachers. It is the beauty of language and what it creates, this connection of culture and language. And this is the Navajo poet, and she talks about the sacredness of the mother tongue. Saad, and I love her. She was on my dissertation committee. I love Lucy Tapahonso. The language which was given to us by the holy ones. Saad contains the wisdom of stories, history, songs, prayers, and teaching that were meant to guide us into the future. It is adaptable and relevant to our changing lifestyles. And this is where, again, we trust those mother tongues, even if we don't understand them and the importance of them, and we embrace them in our classroom. The holy ones knew that we would be blessed and sometimes threatened. Sa'ad is also portable because it lies in our way of life, our approach to challenges, our attitudes about the land, waterable, animals, plants, and environments. Oh, this is so profound. The six butterflies in the Maya culture. I'm so grateful that this is resonating. I, thank you very much. It is incredibly profound for me as well, and something I'm passionate about. I love to share. Now, the imagination of language, and this is where the rubber meets the road. So we know these ideas, we know the importance. Now, what do we do about it? We have to have action. And that is where imagination comes in. The imagination presents us with the possible, potential realities that it is our job to actualize. If all these ideas are in our head, but they stay only in our head, what good does it do if we do not act and bring them into the world? That is where the transformational elements come in. It also presents us with a world, and I love this, that would not be complete without our help. That if we do not act, if we do not engage, the world will not be complete. Imagination creates potential, encourages action and energy, creates new realities. Mother tongue languages make both the teacher and learner creator of many languages. Yes, I love this. Now, what are examples in your own classroom? And this is a photo on my parents' ranch in South Dakota, my mom's window. What are examples of weaving wildness, beauty, and imagination into your teaching in life? And I would love, pretty please, love to see some ideas shared in the chat. How can you create wildness, creativity, beauty, harmony, imagination, action into teaching in life? What are you thinking? What can you do? What can you engage with this very day or night? So, one example I wanted to share how I've created wildness, beauty, and imagination in my own life is I was working on a curriculum project in Panama. And we were creating standards for all of the English language teaching for English through 12th grade for the country. We were working with the Ministry of Education. And what I came to realize is the teachers in Panama did not understand what standards were because they had not had them before. And this was how I spent every Saturday for 6 hours a day for months as we worked on creating standards for the country. And there was a group of us international specialists, and then we worked with national specialists within the country of Panama. And I thought, how can I get these teachers to understand the concepts of standards that wasn't text? And for me, what one thing that I've done a lot is I start drawing. I am not an artist, but I have discovered that I understand things better if I see them visually. If you look up or put it in this, look up after here, because I don't think I got this to work actually the standards tree and what I do with that. Or if you pop me a note and I'm giving you my email right here. I give it to you at the end also, but here it is. I will send this to you, the standards tree, but I just started drawing it and this is what I came up with, and how the standards would start in the rich loam of the Panamanian jungle, because of course it has to be relevant to that context. We went up through the domain of the personal, and then we went into each scenario and these ideas and the standards, and then we express them through themes, and then identify the language skills, which speaking, listening, reading, writing, and how the objectives, the learning outcomes. It came from the National Tree of Panama, the Camuruco, and to get to how do the standards influence learning outcomes. So one of the ways that I express wildness, beauty, and imagination in my teaching is I use multiple ways to express teaching, and I find this a very effective. Another way, this idea of mother tongue languages by Tovis Gutnam Congas, the idea that one well-developed mother tongue is like a lily, and the lilies on the pond that are all connected. And when we prohibit the use of a mother tongue language where the roots are connected, this may float very pretty on the top of the surface of the water for a while, but then it will wither and dry. And how the development of a mother tongue with those roots is the source of strength for every other language that is to come. And this was, oh, the woods are lovely, dark and deep. Oh, yes, I love it. This is actually an indigenous methodology that I used for my dissertation, liliology. I didn't understand. It was very dense text. I just grabbed my paints again and I was like, okay, but what does this mean? And I read and painted and I read and painted. So maybe this is something you could use in your classroom for students. Read and paint, read and paint. And I needed to understand that liliology is about the embrace of all stories. And again, ironically, it was the use of water lilies and how each petal on the water lily embraces each student's story. And historically, not all student stories have been welcomed in academia. Only certain stories were welcomed. And so this is just some ideas about how I have integrated wildness, beauty, and imagination into pedagogy and into understanding. Connecting lessons with nature and real life. Yes, ecolinguistics. Describing seasons, villages, festivals, memories, everyday experiences. Yes, yes, yes. And this idea of translanguaging wildness, beauty, and imagination coming into your classroom draws on the idea that I learned of in Costa Rica, which is a chifladura. And it is where these different rivers, these different streams come together and create a new whole, all of it coming, all of this energy, but they mix. They don't stay separate. They mix together to create a new whole. And that is what I feel translanguaging wildness, beauty, and imagination that works to do in the English language classroom. As you reflect on wildness, authenticity, beauty, harmony, and imagination, action, and language, how might you weave these elements into your teaching and into your life? And I'm so anxious to see you and to see everybody on the screen. So I'm going to share now. We're going to walk down the river together to muse these ideas and think about what this looks like. Embracing of translanguaging, relevancy. What is the linguistic context for students? Be intentional to highlight wildness, beauty, and imagination for students. That's a lemon and orange rose from my garden I love. Here you are, the center of that chifladura, bringing these all together. And again, because it's fun to play with language, do, my name is Dawn Elizabeth Wink, do, and here's a dewdrop. And I invite you to check out, I have a blog that is called Dewdrops, and I write about these ideas. I'll put it right here in our thing, in our I invite you, I share these ideas with an international community. One of the ideas I share is the power of the early morning magic hours. Rise, reflect, renew, the power of the early magic hours, which is what we're sharing right now for me. There's my email. There's ways to connect with me. I would love to stay connected and continue this conversation. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all those things. If you're interested, please take a screenshot. I just